Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Thursday, the 27th of May. It is a beautiful day. The wind is up. It's very crisp and clear. It's a wonderful day to say thank you to God for just being alive. One thing I really need to say thank you to God today for is the fact that in our society, people are really beginning to become aware of things that before maybe they wouldn't have paid attention to. And I don't know, maybe if I was still living in Ontario or Nova Scotia, this wouldn't have come to my attention. But I'm, I'm really frustrated today, along with a lot of Albertans, I think, in the way that we have been treating our Indigenous brothers and sisters. In particular, and this is not to set aside one thing, but this one thing has been set aside that highlights the problem we're having here in our country. Ethan Bear, this young man who is a hockey player. And I was trying to think, I was having my shower this morning trying to think, 32 teams, 30 people a team. Like, there's less than 1,000 hockey players. They're all from around the world in the NHL, which means he is an elite hockey player. This young man from Saskatchewan is an elite hockey player. He would not be on a National Hockey League team if he wasn't. A team that made it to the playoffs, nonetheless. And lately, he has been taking a lot of heat. A lot of people seem to be blaming him or something because the Oilers didn't make it past the Winnipeg Jets in the playoffs. On so many levels, this is just plain stupid. Okay, folks, it's a game. Now, for those of you who have known me for a long time, you know I am a die-hard hockey fan. And it seems like more than a game if you watch me watching a game. But at the end of the day, I've grown up a lot over the years, and I realize that the world is not going to rise or fall on whether or not my team wins the Stanley Cup. My teams can't. I am a dyed-in-the-wool Habs fan, and they're done too. But I also have always loved the Edmonton Oilers. And the fact is, I watched the games, and Edmonton worked hard. They played hard. They did their best. They didn't, one of the games wasn't so good, but they worked their butts off, and they tried really hard to do what they could. And considering everything, I think that's awesome. They had a great season. They did things in a time, as we keep saying, an unprecedented time. They didn't even have their fan base to cheer them on, and Edmonton has a massive fan base. So, I'm just really proud of them for doing what they did. I am not proud of some Albertans who have chosen to really hate on Ethan Bear and somehow make this all about him and the fact that he is Indigenous. What is that about? That's ridiculous. We have just come past the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd's death. And that has been a tipping point for North America. That it literally brought this whole continent to our knees as people took time to kneel and remember what happened to him a year ago. It has caused police agencies across the country in the States, and I'm hoping as well in Canada, to stop and think to themselves, okay, what do we do? And how do we do it? Why do we do it? Do we need to change the way we do things? How do we deal with the public? How do we deal with people who are different than we are? How do we deal with systemic racism? Because it is present and it's in our systems. That's what makes it systemic. And the fact that it's buried in our systems means it's not easy to see. It's an assumed thing. And we might assume that we're not racist, or we might assume we don't have prejudices, but we probably all have something. Maybe some of us are a little bit better at dealing with them, or maybe we've worked on dealing with them as adults, but we probably have something that if we were triggered, we could go back to that base reaction to something. And it appears that for some people in Alberta, we haven't gotten past that base reaction, because this young man, who is a role model in his community, who works hard, who made it to the NHL, who is one of very few Indigenous players in a country that claims that that hockey is our invention, and you can't get more Canadian, really, than an Indigenous person from Canada, a First Nations person. They were here before Canada was. It seems ridiculous to me that people would be hateful about that, and yet they are. So I'm not a big hashtagger, but today I hashtag I stand with Ethan. And I invite you to as well on your Facebook, on your Twitter, or anything else you can think of, just to let people know around the, or whoever you're in connection with, that this isn't right. We will not be a society that we can stand up and say, yes, Canada is all it could be and all it should be, until we no longer have to have hashtags like this. So that brings me from more than just a citizen's perspective of how are we supposed to treat one another, which I would have thought would be so straightforward. We're not there yet. To how do we deal with this as Christians? As people of followers of Jesus Christ, as followers of the Jesus movement, how do we look at people who are different than us? How do we look at people who are other? This morning, as I was walking on my elliptical, I was watching the sermon that the primate, the presiding bishop of the United States Episcopal Church, preached at Pentecost at the National Cathedral in Washington. And he was talking about in Albania in World War II, as the world watched the Third Reich march across Europe. And letters came from powers that be in the German hierarchy. Excuse me. A little dry today. The letters came from the powers that be from the German hierarchy to the powers that be in Albania, stating that they were to gather up the names and addresses and all contact information of every Jewish person in Albania. Well, it turns out that there was a small but strong Muslim community in Albania, and the minister who received this order that they were to provide all of these Jewish names to people, he got that, and he pulled an end run around the Third Reich. He reached out to his Muslim community and said, basically kind of like an underground railroad, he said, we must open our doors to our Jewish brothers and sisters. They will come and live in your homes. They will sleep in your beds. They will eat at your tables. They will be known as members of your community. Now, you can just imagine for the Germans to walk into a Muslim community and to see all those people, you would never believe, I imagine, in their mindset, that the Muslims and Jews would be, breaking bread at the same table. And over 2,000 Jewish people in Albania were saved from the Holocaust because a Muslim politician stood up and reached out to his community and said, they may be different, they may be other, but they are still one of God's creations. They're our brothers and sisters in God. They're children of God, and we will watch out for them. We will protect them. I didn't know that. Stories like that need to be told. They need to be heard. Apparently there was a documentary made a few years ago called In God's House, all about that. I think that's something we should probably be looking up to watch. As Christians, we have a mandate from Jesus Christ that we are to love our enemy. If we're supposed to go as far as love our enemy, what does that say about the person who's not our enemy? Person we may not know them, may not be our friend or our relation, they may not be our neighbor, but they're not even our enemy. How are we supposed to treat them? If we're to love our enemies, then how are we to treat the person who isn't an enemy? Well, obviously we're supposed to love them as well. We are supposed to reach out for them and take care of them and bring them to our home, feed them at our table, let them sleep in our beds. We are to invite them into our whole entire lives. Not because we are trying to convince them to become Christian. Not because we are trying to save them from their sins or, make sure that they're ready when the bugle calls and the glory alleluias are over and Jesus comes again. No, it's much simpler than that. We are called to simply reach out to them with Jesus' love because they are our brothers and sisters in God's world. They are children of God before anything else, like we are. And we are to take care of one another. It's as simple as that. So how do we as Christians respond when people are hating on a young man because he's a hockey player for a team that didn't do as well as some people had hoped? who just happens to be Indigenous. We pray. We stand up. We argue with people if that's what it takes to say, why would you say that? Why would you spread hate? It does no one any good. Hate wins no battles. It saves no souls. It does nothing. But love overcomes everything. Love wins out in the end. So we need to love on Ethan Bear. We need to love on all of the Indigenous and ethnic groups of people who are playing in the NHL and in every different sport, who are in our universities and colleges, who are in our schools and in our workplaces, the people who are influencers of our children and our own lives, because they're everywhere, just like we are, all children of God who happen to look a different way than I do, who happen to have a different cultural background, which is okay. It's a gift. My world can only get bigger if I invite others to share their world with me. And that's what God is asking us to do. He's asking us, like the Muslims in Albania, to bring in the Jews and protect them, not to shove them out, not to throw them under the bus, not to make sure that they get taken so that we don't. He's calling us to love every single human being that God created. How hard is that? That also means we have to love the ones who hate, love our enemies. So today I ask you to say a prayer for Ethan Bear and for all of the men and women who are become public figures because of the gifts that God gave them, that they will have the courage to stand up with dignity and say, this is no longer okay, and ask the world to join them. But we also need to stand up and pray for all those who are threatened by that they might truly know peace and hope in their hearts, and that they might recognize that there is nothing to be threatened by. So today, I invite you in your actions and your words to hashtag I stand with Ethan. I invite you to stay home and stay safe. If you have to go out, wear your mask. Be patient. Be patient as we get through this pandemic. The end is coming. Have a good day. God bless you, and I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael on Friday.